Welcome to WCA County Counsel with Andy Phillips. It's been a busy year for Wisconsin counties. Providing services to the taxpayers and conducting the business of county government is not an easy task. And along the way, many questions come up in the legal arena. This is the last show of 2019, and fittingly, we are going to take a closer look at the top 5 legal issues and questions that our WCA General Counsel, Andy Phillips, most commonly received from our Wisconsin county officials. Let's get started. So Andy, the first topic today we're going to talk about is the legal cases and developments impacting our county sheriff's office. Tell us a little bit about that. What is the latest updates and what's going on?
Well, there's a case currently pending in the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the Court of Appeals in the federal court system that covers Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana. And essentially that case involves an allegation that Polk County was somehow negligent and otherwise responsible for a sexual assault that occurred between a corrections officer and an inmate. The sexual assault occurred many years ago, and the case went to trial. There was a verdict that came back not only finding liability on the part of the corrections officer, obviously that was the individual who sexually assaulted the inmate, but as well finding the county responsible for the sexual assault. The county appealed that case. It went to the 7th Circuit. The 7th Circuit panel, 3 judges, determined that the county was not responsible, but in what's called an en banc rehearing, where the entire 7th Circuit group of judges, there are 12 of them, decided they wanted to hear the case again. And so that is set for oral argument at the beginning of December this year. And so the question becomes whether the county can be held ultimately responsible for the actions and activities of the corrections officer that I think everybody agrees is outside the scope of the employment responsibility for the corrections officer. There's no county that would ever condone activities such as sexually assaulting an inmate. And so the question really becomes, what are the standards that a federal court is going to apply on jail operations? And of course, this impacts not only the uniform jail standards that we have through the Department of Corrections and the Law Enforcement Standards Bureau, but also a sheriff's constitutional authority to keep and maintain the jail, which we know is a big issue for sheriffs. They have a lot of discretion in that regard. And so it's an important case for counties and an important case for the office of sheriff. We want to make sure that case comes out the right way.
So very important for, while a Polk County case impacts all of the rest of our counties.
It impacts all of the other counties.
So Andy, there's also some continued interest regarding county sheriff's authorities over budgeting and personnel. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I've had a couple of questions over the course of the past year just about specific situations involving the role of the chief deputy, the role of other deputies within a sheriff's office, the role of a county administrator and a county board as it relates to adopting, implementing, and enforcing personnel regulations, budgetary constraints, things of that nature as it relates to the office of sheriff. And so if we rewind to, I think it was our 3rd episode where we dealt with the role of the constitutional officer within a county. A sheriff is a constitutional officer, and I think our message has always been, do what you can as a county board, as a constitutional officer, to get together and understand the different roles and responsibilities and see if there's a way to work this out. But where there is dispute, let us, the association, know about it so that we can take a look at it and say, okay, according to what we see in the law, what we see in attorney general opinions, case law, whatever the case may be, this is where the dividing line is drawn in the roles and responsibilities. A couple of those issues, again, have come up over the course of the past year. I think they will continue to keep coming up. We want to see continued conversations between boards, officers, and other administration within counties to hopefully reach a result where everybody can understand and unify in that common mission to serve the citizens.
Great, and you mentioned our previous County Council episode on constitutional officers. I would encourage our viewers to go back and check out that episode for a full in-depth on responsibilities.
And then like it too.
And like it too, please do. So our second issue involves a pending Wisconsin Supreme Court case on weight limits posted on county and town roads. This is a very important issue. Obviously, transportation in our state is a critical issue right now. Can you tell us what's going on there?
Funny how you would say transportation is an important issue,
It
Michelle.
is
That's a subtle plug. What's going on in that case is the town of Delafield imposed weight limits on a town road. A motor carrier was traveling down that road in excess of weight limits, drove off the road and became stuck. Town had to extricate the truck from the ditch and ended up, Sheriff's Department, I believe, ended up citing the vehicle for being overweight. And so the defense that the motor carrier presented was, look, you cannot impose these weight limits because of a federal law that allows us to deliver these goods to their intended destination. In other words, your weight limits would prohibit us from doing our job in delivering these goods. The circuit court bought into that argument, said, yeah, you can't cite. On appeal, the town of Delafield appealed. On appeal, the Court of Appeals said, no, you cannot have a federal law that essentially preempts the weight limits that are there for valid safety, taxpayer resource, all of these other very important concerns. The Supreme Court just recently accepted certification of that case, and so it is going to proceed before the Supreme Court. We've been working with the Towns Association, the County Highway Association, to present our arguments to the Supreme Court that talks about and discusses this whole concept of federal preemption. When is it that the feds can come in and preempt our local authority to establish things like weight limits on town roads, county highways, and similar things?
And I think I'm sensing another county council on the preemption issue. I think that's something we should add to the queue for next year.
Perfect.
For
I'll
20,
have to
for 2020.
do some reading. That's
okay.
Great.
You've got the holidays to do that. So the third case, or the third topic we have is the very first episode of County Counsel we did was on the sales tax litigation case up in Brown County. What is the continuation of that show? What is going on with that, the latest updates?
So the case proceeded to oral argument on cross motions for summary judgment at the end of August. That's a very legal way of saying, essentially, we presented to the court all of the legal arguments in the case and said there's no disputed fact, we don't need a trial, we don't need witnesses. Essentially, that's a legal question. What does the statute require? And so that was all submitted to the court and argued at the end of August, and we are literally in a holding pattern waiting for a decision from the judge. We expect it any day now. It could come out any day. But while that wait is happening, while we're waiting for that decision, I know Outagamie County adopted a sales tax and had a very specific ordinance as it relates to how the proceeds from that tax are going to be used. It seems to be a constant conversation topic whenever I get together with county officials. What's going on with the Brown County case? Is there a problem with our ordinance? Would you mind taking a look at it? And unfortunately, I have to say, let's wait and see, because we want to see what the Brown County Court does, and then after that determine, are the plaintiffs going to appeal an adverse decision? In other words, if we get the decision that we like out of the Brown County Circuit Court, then of course the other side has an opportunity to take it to the Court of Appeals. Vice versa, if Brown County gets an adverse decision, I think there's going to be tremendous momentum to take that to the Court of Appeals. So we'll have to see how that all plays out.
Another thing we're going to keep track of for 2020.
Absolutely.
Number 4 on the list, open government. It's always an issue, always developments with that. Can you tell us, I know there's a recent, not recently, but a DOJ ruling on issuing guidance for copies. Photocopies, is that what we're talking when we say copies?
That's exactly right. It was about a little over a year ago, essentially, the Attorney General came out and said, look, here's what we charge for photocopies, and I think it was just over 1 cent per page, which is obviously much lower than what we know several counties out there charge on a per page basis for copies of these records. We were concerned by DOJ issuing this guidance out there that would lead to a lot of requesters saying, hey, you know what, your charges are too high, and if DOJ only charges a penny, why are you charging us 20 cents, 25 cents? We haven't seen a lot of challenges, but we have seen a lot of consternation on the part of Corporation Counsel and others saying, what is the appropriate rate chart that we should use for these records requests? We have had some discussions with the Attorney General's office about this issue, we being the association. And I know that the DOJ has taken the position that is not guidance, that is simply what we charge. Well, that's comforting, that's good, but I also think it'd be nice if DOJ would say, when you set your rates, these are the various factors that you consider. That way we have uniformity, maybe not on rate, but at least on the factors that you consider in setting that rate, so we can hopefully avoid any of the challenges from the requesters.
Sure. Okay, can you talk a little bit about required notices? I think there's continuing uncertainty, maybe a little bit of confusion about the posting of things.
And this goes back a couple of years too, where the Attorney General issued an informal opinion in a Winnebago County matter, which essentially said this practice that counties typically use of saying, hey, by the way, public, we might have members of another committee or the county board itself attending this committee hearing, and they are not going to take official action. It will not be an official meeting. It was called the bag key notice that you'd find on a lot of the bottom of the agendas that went out for these meetings. Attorney General's office said, no, those bag key notices are insufficient, and that led to widespread confusion about what do we have to do to comply with the law. And so we continue to have discussions with the Attorney General's office and DOJ about how do we comply with the law to make sure that the public is aware that other public officials on other committees and other boards might be at a particular committee meeting, because from our perspective, an involved county board is a good county board. They need the information that they require to do their job. So how do we create a situation where we are actually encouraging people to attend the meeting? Because right now there's confusion where people are saying, well, I should stay away from the meeting. that's not the right result. And so we want to make sure we get to the right result.
Okay. Number 5.
Finally, number 5.
Finally, counties are seeking levee relief through referendum. What is the status of that? Just talk us through that and where things you expect to see.
So in 2006, the legislature imposed levy limits on counties and made it so counties could not exceed the levy limit absent permission from the electors. Okay, and so with the advent of levy limits, we have had over the years circumstances where counties have said we can't operate within the established levy limit. And so there have been a couple of counties that have sought elector approval to exceed their levy limit, but now I think it's becoming more of an acute problem, because if you look at it over the course of the past 13 years since levy limits were imposed, what we're being asked to do as counties has just gotten greater and bigger and more expensive. And so the levy limits that were in place in 2006 and have grown very, very in small increments since then, that's not sufficient to carry out our mission as county government. And so I've received inquiries from a couple of different counties about how do we go about this process of establishing elector approval through the referendum process to exceed those levy limits. And as an association, we've sought relief from the legislature about the various dates and deadlines associated with that referendum process, because the one that they had in there was simply unworkable based upon our receipt as counties of all of the information and data from DOR relating to net new construction and other facts and figures that the legislature said you have to put this in the referendum, in the question that goes to the electors. And we've sought some relief, and we think we're on a good path to get that legislation adopted, which would then open the door for counties then to seek that elector approval. But again, I've received a couple of inquiries from counties saying, can you help us with this referendum process? And so we've been doing that.
Absolutely. All right, Andy, well, these are top 5, but we know you are a tremendous resource for our counties, and there's probably a top 100 if we had several hours to sit here. Not sure if we'd lose some viewers along the way.
Do that? We might lose a couple of viewers.
Just
I think you're right.
one or two. It's been a pleasure doing the show in 2019. We are excited for 2020 with a whole bevy of new topics, and happy holidays to you and your family.
Happy holidays to you as well. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Andy. That concludes our final episode of the year of WCA County Counsel with Andy Phillips. We'll see you back here in 2020. In the meantime, we encourage you to check out previous episodes at wicounties.org. Thanks so much and happy holidays.